Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you back here in the virtual world, and congratulations, you have made it to your final lecture of the semester, and we are almost finished with everything. So congratulations to making it to the end. Okay, so just a couple business points for you. Um, your your second lab exam scores are finished. So if you haven't already done so, you can log into ClassMarker and get your personal score for that. Okay. So if you have any questions about that, please by all means send me an email. The class average on the lab exam was somewhere around a 78%, so not too bad. Okay, so please log into ClassMarker to get your lab exam scores. Also, you know that today is our last lecture. I'll be covering chapters 17 and 18 very briefly with you. We can't completely do everything because there's just no time. But expect that later today you will receive, in my typical email to you, you will receive your study guide for your final exam, which is next week, Wednesday, May 13th, okay? So you will get your study guide this afternoon and have that available. And as I mentioned, I think I may have mentioned before, you know, we haven't had enough time here at the end of the semester to cover everything as deeply as we normally would. So, you know, the expectations on the final exam will be quite modest. I won't say easy, but they will be modest, okay? So, do you have any questions right now as we finish up our semester? Okay, not hearing anything. So, you know, if you do have a question, by all means, I will ask again at the end of our time here today if you have any other questions. And I'll also be monitoring email over the next several days, including next week. So if that something comes up, you can send me an email and I will do my best to help you, okay? Okay, so let's continue. We're going to talk a little bit about chapter 17 today and a little bit about chapter 18 today. This will not be incredibly intensive because, well, folks, we are out of time, but at least I can introduce some basic ideas and some basic anatomy to you from these chapters. So let's go to our Microsoft Word document. And here we are. So we have the chat window up. If you need to get a hold of me, go ahead. And we have our typical Microsoft Word document. So I'm going to begin with chapter 17, hopefully take about half of our hour and 15 minutes in that, and then switch gears to chapter 18, okay? All right, so chapter 17 is the reproductive system. Okay, the reproductive systems. Which honestly are a fascinating topic. And if you do happen to take our anatomy and physiology course at some point in the future, you would get pretty in-depth coverage of the reproductive systems in anatomy and physiology too, okay? But, you know, basically we're going to refresh your memory of some things that you may have had in high school health class, maybe cover some things you haven't had, and give you a chance to ask any questions you might have, okay? Now's your opportunity to do that. Let's start with some basic definitions that will help us moving forward, okay? So, you know, the term gonad, okay? The term gonad refers to the sex organs, either the testicles in males or the ovaries in women. Okay. The ovaries basically function to, the gonads basically function to do two things, and that is to produce the reproductive cells, which are called gametes, okay, as well as manufacturing a variety of different sex hormones. What probably comes to mind right now is testosterone in men and estrogen and progesterone in women, although it is certainly true that both sexes create all of these hormones just in varying amounts. Okay, so we have the testes, which are the male gonads, and the ovaries, which are the female gonads. Okay, sort of a conversation about the birds and the bees, but we're going to be talking about anatomically correct information here. Okay, a gamete, as we've said, is an unfertilized reproductive cell. An unfertilized reproductive cell. So that means it's going to be, right, it's going to be a sperm in the male body, or it's going to be an unfertilized egg cell in the female body. Okay. Does anybody happen to know off the top of your head, and this would only be the case if you've had it in other courses, do you know what the process of making sperm and egg cells is called? Do you know what the cellular reproduction process is? Okay, let me type that question into the chat window. What is the name of the process that is used to manufacture sperm or egg? Do you know, folks? Would it help you if I gave you a hint? It starts with the letter M. Okay, Abigail, it is not mitosis. So does that tell you what it is?
Is it meiosis?
Okay, that is it, right? That is it. So we'll put that down here in the chat window and in your notes, okay? The process of manufacturing sperm or egg is called meiosis, okay? Actually, in a previous version of this course, we used to talk about more of these topics, and then it was taken out because some of the nursing faculty didn't feel that nurses really need to understand the intimate details of meiosis, okay? So, yeah, that is the process, and maybe you've seen or read about that in another course. Okay, so let's see here. Fertilization. Okay, fertilization is the event that occurs when a sperm enters an egg cell. The moment the sperm enters the egg, that is fertilization, okay? Okay. Okay, another question for you coming through the chat window. How many chromosomes does the male sperm deliver into the egg cell? How many chromosomes does the male sperm deliver into the egg cell? Is this clearing away some cobwebs? Okay. All right, thank you. Kirsten, you have it right. Aylin, it's not 23 pairs. 23 pairs refers to the fertilized egg cell, the whole thing. But the sperm delivers 23 individual chromosomes into the already 23 individual chromosomes that are in the egg cell. So when you have 23 and 23 come together, we have 23 pairs. Okay, the father's sperm delivers 23 individual chromosomes into the 23 individual chromosomes of the egg cell. Okay. These chromosomes, okay, well, let me let me finish with my notes here, and then I'll tell you something here, okay? Okay, so we know what fertilization is. It's when the sperm enters the egg cell, okay? So when that happens, when a sperm enters an egg cell, the egg cell is fertilized. So it's not a gamete anymore. Do you know what it is called once it's fertilized? What's a fertilized egg cell called? Anybody know that? What is a fertilized egg cell called? Because it's not a gamete anymore.
Is it a zygote?
Okay, thank you both. You're right, Terry, and Riley's correct. It is a zygote. Okay. Okay, a zygote is a fertilized egg cell. Okay, a fertilized egg cell will contain 46 individual or 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay. Now, help me out here. You'll make me feel good if you can answer this next question, but it is a question that takes you back to the beginning weeks, the beginning days of our semester. What are the building blocks of nucleic acid called? What are the building blocks of nucleic acid called? You remember? Oh, thank you, Kirsten. Nucleotides, that's exactly right. So now my next question to you is this. How many nucleotides are found along all 46 chromosomes? How many nucleotides are found along all 46 chromosomes? You have any idea? If you had to guess, how many nucleotides of genetic information does it take to make the instruction manual for your body?
4 or 5 or 20?
I'm sorry, Terry, did you have an answer there? I couldn't quite hear you.
I was guessing 4. I'm not sure if I'm right.
Okay, thank you for trying. So there are 4 different nucleotides that you can have, right? A, T, C, and G, if you're familiar with that biology. But you have to put them together to build all of the DNA. So how many nucleotides in total is found in our DNA? I'll put this into your notes. How many nucleotides are found in your diploid genome? Okay, when we have a father sperm delivering 23 individual chromosomes, okay, that sperm is a haploid cell, meaning it has 23 single chromosomes. The unfertilized egg cell is also haploid. It has 23 single chromosomes. Once you fertilized this and created a fertilized egg cell with 46 chromosomes, this is actually a diploid cell. Okay, so it has 46 chromosomes. So how many nucleotides are found in your diploid genome?
So it has to be about millions and millions, right?
Well, it's actually billions. And so, right, so you folks are starting to get to the right ballpark. The answer is actually 6.4 billion nucleotide pairs of DNA, okay? What you just found the answer to is called the human diploid genome. That's what we have here, the human diploid genome. There are 6.4 billion nucleotides of DNA, and all the cells that line your mouth, all the cells that line your, that are part of your skin cells. Okay, there's 6.4 billion letters worth of genetic instruction to build your body. Okay, the original draft of the human genome, which was only the haploid version of the genome, was originally published in 2001, and it took about $3 billion of taxpayer money to get that initial map. Okay, that's how involved these projects really are. Okay, do you have any questions right now? Okay, folks, what I'm going to do is spend a few minutes on both the male and female reproductive anatomy, simply pointing out some features. Okay, I mean, you know, let's be honest. If you're a male, you don't spend too much time thinking about the endometrium, right? You just don't. But if you're female, you probably don't spend too much time thinking about the seminiferous tubules, right? So, you know, we want you to be comfortable with the anatomy of both genders. So, the anatomy of the male reproductive system. You can see the major pictures that I'll be talking about on pages 338 and 339 of your textbook. And, you know, this, I'm not going to go blow by blow for everything here because there's just not enough time. But there are some things that I would like to talk about. And I would ask that as we put these in your notes that you do look at them in the textbook so you know exactly what it is I'm referring to. Okay, so let's talk about the seminal vesicles. Okay, the seminal vesicles refers to a pair of glands that produce a fluid that makes up part of the male semen. Okay. And what I can tell you about this fluid is that the fluid that's manufactured by these glands makes up about 60% of the volume of semen. Okay. And this fluid contains a lot of material that nourishes the sperm and helps the sperm actually swim. So it helps the sperm actually become mobile. Okay. So the fluid contains citric acid. It contains the sugar fructose. It contains a variety of amino acids. And it also contains prostaglandins. Okay. Okay. This material, prostaglandins, this material helps the sperm swim. Okay, obviously it has to swim so it can fertilize the egg. All right, so that's the seminal vesicles. Please ask questions along the way if you have them. Number 2, the prostate gland. Okay, this is another gland. It produces fluid that contributes anywhere between 15 to 30% of semen volume. Also produces a fluid that is part of semen. Okay. And it makes up about, it varies between 15 to 30% of semen volume. Okay. The fluid that is manufactured by the prostate gland actually has a basic pH. A basic pH. Does that mean it is above 7 or below 7? What do you think? If you have a basic pH, is that above 7 or below 7?
Hello?
I think I heard below. Actually, it's above, right? It's above, right? Anything above 7 on the pH scale is a basic pH value, Okay, so the pH of this fluid is basic, meaning it is greater than 7. And the basic nature of this fluid actually activates the sperm to swim. It's actually the pH value of this fluid that actually turns the swimming activity of the sperm on. It activates sperm swimming. Okay. All right. Now, let's see here. Okay, if you look very carefully at where the prostate gland is located on page 338, okay, just put an eyeball on that. You'll notice that the prostate gland is actually underneath the bladder in males, okay? And so that prostate gland is something that often gives men difficulty as they get age, as they get older, because a lot of times the prostate gland, when you get older, it begins to swell. It's called this phenomenon called hypertrophy. And so a lot of times older men will have the sensation like they feel like they got to go to the bathroom frequently. And that's oftentimes a problem with the prostate getting larger as men age. Okay. Okay, prostate gland frequently enlarges with age, which gives older men the sensation that they have to urinate frequently. Okay, all right, so, you know, these are the things, if you're a guy in the class, or ladies, if you know, men in your life that you care about, you know, they're going to experience these things as they get older. Okay. Let me talk about something else here. Let's talk about the bulbourethral gland. Okay, you see that on the left side of terms on page 338. Okay, the bulbourethral gland is actually a pair of glands. They secrete a mucus right before a male ejaculates during intercourse, and the pH of the fluid that's secreted from these glands actually neutralizes the acidity of the male urethra, right? I mean, both the male and female urethra are very acidic environments because urine tends to be acidic. Okay, it tends to have a low pH, below 7. So right before ejaculation, this pair of glands will release a material that will actually neutralize the acidity of the urethra, and so will help make the passageway safer for the sperm to be released, so the sperm doesn't die on its way out of the body. A pair of glands that releases a neutralizing liquid to neutralize the acidity of the urethra. Okay, this makes it safer for the sperm to leave the body. Okay. All right. Alexi, your question, is it the drop in testosterone levels that causes the growth of the prostate gland? It sometimes is, Alexi. It sometimes is. However, sometimes older men have normal testosterone levels, and yet the gland still enlarges. So the answer is we don't quite know. We do know it's associated with aging. The cells seem to absorb more water through osmosis and enlarge. So it often happens with the drop in testosterone, but it can happen without the drop in testosterone as well. Other questions? Okay, let's keep going here. The epididymis. The epididymis. Okay, the epididymis is a pair of ducts which they don't manufacture the sperm, but they provide a location for the sperm that has been manufactured. They provide a storage location for that sperm to be stored and to mature, to go through cellular processes where the sperm become mature and become capable of fertilizing an egg. So this is a pair of ducts that are used to store sperm after they have been made, and provides a location for the sperm to mature so they are capable of fertilizing an egg. Okay? All right. Number five. Number five is the testicle itself, the testis. Okay. Obviously, there are two of them. These are the major reproductive organs, as we put in your notes above. They manufacture the sperm and the testosterone. Okay. And what I like to point out here, because it's something that you don't, it's not like you talk about this too frequently every day, right? But it's still important to know something about this, if for no other reason than sometimes because men and women, they want to have a family, they want to have children, and all of a sudden they come up with infertility issues, and you got to figure out, well, what the heck's wrong here? Okay, so there's lots of complicated things here, even in a topic that's kind of makes people uncomfortable to talk about. So if you look at the internal structure of the testis on figure 17.2, page 339, there's two things that I want to point out to you. First is the seminiferous tubules. Okay, seminiferous tubules. Folks, the seminiferous tubules, those coiled pink ribbons that you find wrapped up inside each individual testicle, that's actually where the sperm is manufactured. This is where the process of meiosis does its magic, so to speak. Okay, so the seminiferous tubules are the microscopic sites of sperm production in the male testicle. And in addition to that, there are cells in the testicle which you really can't see. In that picture, but there are a special subset of cells in the testicle that are referred to as interstitial cells, and it's these cells that manufacture testosterone. Okay. All right. So, the average male, I mean the average healthy, normal male, manufactures somewhere between 200 to 400 million sperm every day. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's continue here. Let's talk about the vas deferens. Okay, the vas deferens is the target of that procedure that you probably have heard of in your life called the vasectomy. Okay, so please put an eyeball on this on page 338. Vas deferens. Okay, these are a pair of ducts, and their function is to transport sperm from the epididymis, where they are stored after being manufactured, to the urethra so they can be expelled from the body. Pair of ducts, when I say ducts, they're really tubes, right, that transport sperm from the epididymis to the urethra during intercourse. Okay. And so you can see why a vasectomy would potentially be a birth control mechanism for males, because if you tie the vas deferens tubes or if you surgically cut them, then the sperm can't get out of the body. And that's basically what happens there, okay? So a vasectomy is a procedure that cuts or sometimes ties the vas deferens tubes so that sperm cannot exit the body. Okay? All right. So let me mention something here that is important. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Okay. And what I'm going to point out is, right, when we talk about birth control, there's lots of different versions of birth control, and unfortunately we won't have too much time to go into that really. But when we talk about permanent birth control, you know, a vasectomy is a permanent form of birth control, right? Once the male has those vas deferens cut, you don't need to take any other drugs. Well, you don't need to wear a condom. The female partner does not have to be on birth control or anything like that, right? It is a permanent form of birth control in males. And does anybody know what the equivalent procedure in women would be? What is the equivalent birth control procedure in women? What would be the equivalent in women? A hysterectomy? Oh, well, okay, that surprised me you would answer that. Kirsten, hysterectomy is not used as a form of birth control. Hysterectomies are done for other reasons when you remove a woman's uterus. So that's not a form of birth control, although if you have to have your uterus removed, that certainly will be a permanent birth control, but that's not typically done. Okay. Have any of you ever heard of a woman having her tubes tied? Do you know what that's called? Okay, well, it's called a tubal ligation. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so in the male anatomy on page 338, once again, take a look at where the vas deferens is, okay? Notice the vas deferens runs, it runs from the prostate gland the whole way from the testicle to the prostate gland, okay? And let's take a look at the female anatomy on page 342. On page 342, do you see that structure there called an oviduct? An oviduct, O-V-I-D-U-C-T. The oviduct, you may be familiar because your mothers and grandmothers probably called it by a different name. It used to be referred to as a fallopian tube. At any rate, a permanent form of birth control is to have a tubal ligation where the oviduct is tied shut. And by tying it shut, the eggs that are released from the ovary cannot travel to the uterus, and therefore they cannot be fertilized and implanted to support a pregnancy. Okay? Long story short, that's how it works. But what I want to point out here is this. Okay, so take a look at where the oviduct is inside a woman's body. You notice that the oviduct is physically very far from the opening of the body. The oviduct is far from the entrance of the vagina. That means it's kind of an invasive procedure for women to have a tubal ligation. It's invasive, meaning meaning there's more chance of harm to the woman's body. Whereas if you once again look at the vas deferens on page 338, they run from the prostate gland the whole way down to the testicle, which hangs in the male scrotal sac. So in other words, it's much less invasive. It is a much safer surgery for men to have the vasectomy than it is for women to have the tubal ligation. And the reality of it is, you know, if you're married, you're going to have a conversation potentially with your mate. Typically, the husband and wife will have to have a conversation who's going to go through the birth control procedure if you don't want to have any more children. And I'm simply pointing out that it is safer for men to have a vasectomy than it is for women to have a tubal ligation, because the vas deferens are more easily accessible at the surface of the male body than the oviduct is, which is deeper inside a woman's body. Is this making sense? Okay. All right. All right, folks, I'm going to start going faster because before you know it, I'm going to be out of time. Okay, so let me just put down here, a vasectomy is a safer procedure for males to have than an equivalent tubal ligation is for a female to have. All right. Okay, gang. So I'm not, you know, we're already getting close on our time, so I'm going to skip talking about the things that I think are obvious. I mean, you all know what the penis is, right? And things like that. So this is not a comprehensive list. Let me type in penis. Okay, this is the male organ that facilitates the delivery of sperm into the female reproductive tract. And I'll finish it with specifically talking about the glans penis, right? If you look on page 338, you see the glans penis, which is the tip of the penis, okay? And what I like to point out here is that the tip of the male penis is the portion of the male body that has the densest number of nerve endings, which is why it is extraordinarily sensitive and why it gives men such incredible pleasure during sexual reproduction, is because the tip of the penis has the most number of nerve endings, okay? It has more nerve endings than fingertips. That's how many nerve endings are present, okay? The tip of the penis is the most densely populated area of the body containing nerve endings. Okay, all right. So I'm going to switch gears here at this time, but before I switch gears, let me ask you, what is the equivalent structure to the glans penis in women? What's the equivalent structure? Think about it. What area of a woman's reproductive anatomy contains the highest number of nerve endings to create sexual pleasure? What do you think? Is that a hard question? All right. Okay, Lexi, very good. The clitoris. If you don't believe me, and it's okay if you don't believe me, but let me prove it to you, please turn to page 375. 375 in your book, figure 1811. Here we have an example of the male and female reproductive anatomy during development inside the womb. And do you see on page 375, do you see at 14 weeks gestation, do you notice where the clitoris is being highlighted? And on the equivalent analogous picture on the male anatomy, you see that it's pointing to the glans penis. Okay, so the glans penis and the clitoris are equivalent structures in each gender. Okay. Okay, gang, let's jump to some female anatomy here because I don't want to give all the boys all the attention here. Okay, yes. Female reproductive anatomy. So for that, please be looking at page 342 and maybe 343 a little bit. And again, this is not going to be comprehensive, but I'm going to pick out certain things to talk about. Obviously, you need to know what the uterus is. The uterus is the organ that provides the location that a developing fetus can mature in. Okay, so this is the organ that the growing baby, more properly the embryo and fetus, develops in. Okay. The uterine wall, okay, so please be looking at these things. Please put an eyeball on them. The uterine wall is a muscular layer of material that is able to stretch as the baby gets larger. So as the baby gets larger, because muscle tissue is stretchy, you know that. We've said that elasticity is one of the features of muscle tissue. The wall of the uterus can stretch to accommodate the growing baby. And during the childbirth process, the uterine wall can actually contract to help push the child out of the woman's body. Okay. Uterine wall is made of layers of muscle tissue that can stretch as the baby grows and can contract during childbirth to help push the baby out of the body. Okay. Sorry, I'm going a little bit fast here, folks, so that I want to get things done. You probably know, I mean, you know, ladies are going to be more comfortable with this because it is their body, but obviously males, you should know about this as well. The lining of the uterus, it has a special name. It's called the endometrium. Okay, this is the lining of the uterus, and this is the lining of the uterus that actually gets thicker each month during a woman's menstrual cycle. The purpose of getting thicker is for anticipating that a fertilized egg, a zygote, is actually going to implant in that thick layer of material and then use that material as nourishment to allow the cells to reproduce and the baby to start to grow. So this is the lining of the uterus that thickens each month as part of the menstrual cycle. Okay. The thickening is a result of the body anticipating the implantation of a fertilized egg. Okay, and obviously, if that anticipation is not met, if there is no implantation of the fertilized egg, then the woman will shed that lining once a month. Okay. Next we have the cervix. Well, that's simply the opening of the uterus. Okay. Some forms of birth control will actually place something across the cervix, and so that can sometimes be used as a birth control method, okay, to prevent the sperm from entering the female reproductive tract. The vagina, well, that's the birth canal, right? That's the location of the body where the child's going to exit. Okay, that birth canal is populated with a variety of microorganisms, you know, from bacteria to some protozoa, actually. Okay, that's not a bad thing. That's entirely natural and normal that microorganisms are in the vagina. That's completely normal. Okay. Let's see here. The oviduct. Okay, we talked about that. The oviduct is formerly called the fallopian tubes. Formerly called the fallopian tubes. Okay, and you can see them on page 342. The purpose of these tubes is to transport the egg that's been released from the ovary to the uterus for potential implantation into the endometrium. Okay, these tubes transport eggs toward the uterus for eventual possible implantation into the endometrium to support a pregnancy. Okay. All right, so this gives me an opportunity to ask another question for you. So let me ask a question through the chat window. What typically happens when a woman experiences an ectopic pregnancy? What typically happens when a woman experiences an ectopic pregnancy? What's the deal with that? Do you know? Have you heard of an ectopic pregnancy? Okay, thank you, Riley. The fetus is trying to grow in the oviduct. That's exactly right. So what that means is that what I didn't put in your notes yet, doggone it, I'm trying to fix the spelling, implantation. Another thing about the oviduct is the primary site of fertilization, okay? This is the primary location for fertilization where the sperm will enter the egg. But it's not meant to be the site that actually allows the baby to grow and develop. That's the uterus, okay? In some circumstances, the zygote incorrectly implants in the wall of the oviduct instead of the uterine wall where it's supposed to happen, causing an ectopic pregnancy. Okay? Folks, ectopic pregnancies are a bad deal, right? They are dangerous, okay? Ectopic pregnancies, generally speaking, have to be aborted because as the baby grows in the oviduct, which was not designed to stretch like the uterine wall is, you can actually tear the oviduct, including the blood vessels in the oviduct, and cause internal bleeding in the woman's body, which would obviously kill the woman and the growing child. Okay, so these are actually very dangerous circumstances. Ectopic pregnancies are dangerous to both mom and child. Okay. All right. Um,
I have a question.
yes.
Instead of doing the abortion, are there cases where doctors decide to do some sort of C-section to save the baby and the mother?
Well, typically not, Terry, because um, the child typically has to do a C-section. The child has to be mature enough that it can basically live on its own outside the body, or at the very least, it could live in an incubator in a hospital setting. So it's still going to have to be at least, I would say, at least 7 months along in development. But that's too late because a child that's growing inside a woman's body is going to get to a size that is dangerous for her after 2 to 3 months. It's going to become too dangerous for her to continue to allow that pregnancy to continue. It's too much of a risk that the oviduct would rupture at, say, month 4 or 5 and kill the woman. So typically it's not done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now there is a little bit of leeway in this process in terms of, you know, obviously sonograms can be done and things like this to explore the internal anatomy in the womb. If the ectopic pregnancy is actually very close to the uterine opening, sometimes doctors will let it go longer to see if it will transition into the uterus. But if the implant is high up in the oviduct, typically the only safe thing to do then is unfortunately to abort that pregnancy. Other questions? Okay. All right. So to complete our notes here, I will once again put in the clitoris and mention that this is a very small organ and it is densely populated with nerve endings. And as far as we know, the only real purpose of the clitoris in women actually is for sexual excitement. Okay, sexual arousal. Okay, that's not an ugly term, right? It's part of the process that animals go through so that they mate and we continue to have children and keep the species alive. All right. All right. And then, so we all know about penises. We all know about vagina, right? Because we've grown up in the society we've grown up, and there's lots of dirty jokes out there. We know about breasts on page 343. But the point about the breast that I would like to make here is that in terms of a baby, right? The breasts are the machinery of the woman's body that manufacture the nourishing milk that allow the baby to grow after it's removed from the woman's body, after it is born. Okay. So there's a pair of mammary glands that manufacture life-sustaining milk for newborn infants. And you probably are aware that it generally is, under most circumstances, it is far better for a woman to breastfeed than it is to bottle feed from artificial milk sources such as, cow's milk or goat's milk. It really is better for natural breastfeeding as long as there's no underlying health issues. It's better for a mother to breastfeed because the mother's body, her immune system is making antibodies that are protective for the woman's body, and those antibodies actually go into the breast milk, and when the child nurses, the child will consume these protective antibodies that can then provide a level of passive immunity to the baby until the baby's own body and immune system matures enough to defend itself against threats like bacteria and viruses out in the real world. Okay. Breastfeeding is usually the best option for infants because the mother's milk contains protective antibodies to defend the baby against bacteria, viruses, etc. Okay? All right. Questions, gang? Okay. Folks, there's certainly content in this chapter we don't have time to cover. I'm not going to beat you up with it on your final exam. You know, I would hope that you'd be curious enough to want to read it. I mean, your book does talk about the ovarian cycle on page 343, and it talks about the uterine cycle and the coordination of them in the next subsequent pages. These are important ideas, but they are complicated, and I can't cover them with you and talk about chapter 18 here in the remaining 20 minutes. So please read these things, but don't stress out about it. They're not going to be a major emphasis of your final exam. So just relax. I'm not going to beat you up about these complicated things. Okay? So at this moment in time, is there really anything you'd like to ask about the reproductive systems in males or females? Is there anything you've been curious about you just want to ask? Okay, either you're not curious or you're embarrassed to perhaps ask. So certainly if you're curious about something and you want to ask me, but you don't want to ask me online, please send me an email and I'll be happy to help you out with that. I will make one comment about, you know, we haven't had a chance to talk about hormones and things like that that are influential in human reproductive systems. But let me mention that, you know, in today's society, it's very normal that young folks, for a variety of reasons, tend to put off having children for a while because it just takes longer to get your footing in the world, to get your education, develop your career, and have enough income to have a child. I completely understand that. But let me mention to you that from a biological perspective, at least in women and you girls, your biological clocks are running, and your biological clocks, they don't appreciate the fact that maybe you don't have enough money for a child right now. But what I'm saying is, you know, while men will continue to manufacture healthy sperm into their 50s, 60s, and even 70s, ladies, you are born with all the egg cells you're ever going to have, and you're not going to make any more throughout your life. So the take-home message here is that, you know, if you want to have a family, your fertility is going to start dropping in your early 30s. And let's say you get to a point where you feel comfortable wanting to have a family and have some children with somebody, and you get to 35, you might find yourself having a hard time getting pregnant. So what I'm trying to say to you gals is, if you want to have a family and you think it's a long way off before you might want to have that family, you might want to seriously give thought to having some of your eggs frozen, because the reproductive capacity of the eggs declines as you get older. So you are not going to be as fertile. You're not going to be as capable of having a pregnancy at 35 as you are at 25. Okay? Just be careful of that, because I have personally known couples in my life that have had difficulty getting pregnant, and they had no idea that it had to do with this biological clock issue. So just be careful out there. If you think you're, you know, if you're a 25-year-old woman and you want to have a family, but you don't think you're going to have one for 10 more years, you might want to talk to a doctor about having some of your eggs frozen. Okay, thoughts or questions? All right, gang, let's take a look at a couple ideas from chapter 18. I'm sorry, this is very superficial in its coverage. It's just the nature of the beast right now. Okay, so let's turn to chapter 18, which starts on page 366. Okay, so chapter 18 really does fit chapter 17 very well because it talks about the development of our bodies throughout our life. So obviously, chapter 17 is about sexual reproduction, all the anatomy about fertilizing an egg and supporting the development of a child in a mother's womb. And then the child's born, and then what happens after that? So we can talk about a few things here with the remaining time that we have. Okay. So stages in the development of a human being. Well, we can break it down into two huge stages, right? We have the prenatal stage, which is everything that happens before you are born, okay? So this is before birth, and this is the first 9 months of your life, right? Typically, I mean, obviously you could be born early, you might be premature and be born when you're 8 months old, that happens, but on average it's 9 months. And then we have the postnatal period, or postnatal stage. This is everything after birth. This is what you and I and your fellow classmates are in right now, right? Everything after birth. Okay, so it is from the moment you left your mother's body to however old you will live. Okay, from birth until death. Okay. Anybody know what the average lifespan of an American male is at this time? It does vary depending on your data source, and it ebbs and flows a little bit, but the average American male life expectancy at this time is about 75.5 years. Okay, so most of us guys are going to check out by around 75. Okay. For you ladies, you are somewhat blessed, I guess, depending on your perspective. The average American female life expectancy is actually 80 years. The data I have is 80.6 years. All right, so there clearly is a difference in life expectancy between men and women. And you know, I always tease my wife that men die earlier because the ladies stress us out, and I still think that's true. But at any rate, there is a difference in life expectancy between the males and females, and increasingly, we're also seeing a difference in life expectancy based on poverty. Right, poverty levels have worsened in the United States in the past 3 decades. And that's a big problem because it's really impacting people's health and how long he or she can live. Okay. Alexi, your grandpa's still alive at 84. God bless him. That's awesome. That really is, right? We're talking about averages here, but still men can live longer, right? I mean, there's an old male Japanese guy that's well over 100. So it does happen. Okay. Okay. Wow, I'm trying to figure out what to talk about here in 10 minutes. Okay. Let me talk just a little bit about the prenatal period. And this will just be a survey. Okay, the prenatal stage here. Okay. When we talk about the prenatal stage, we typically break that down into 3 substages. We have the pre-embryonic phase, or the pre-embryonic period. This is from fertilization through week 2 of the pregnancy. Okay, it's during this stage that fertilization in the oviduct will occur and implantation in the endometrial lining. This is when fertilization and implantation occurs. Okay, and so it's during the end of this period, the pre-embryonic period, that you start noticing certain membranes develop around the embryo. Don't worry about them. I'm not going to beat you up. But if you're curious, you know, you may hear about on your own life about the amniotic sac, which contains the amniotic fluid. Well, that can be seen on figure 18.7 on page 372. Okay. All right. By the way, this is probably a question here that might be useful and interesting and have some practical value to you. What is the name of the substance that pregnancy tests check for? Do you know? You know, sometimes you young folks end up fooling around and you get scared whether a gal's going to be pregnant or something. So you might go to your local supermarket and get an over-the-counter pregnancy test kit. What exactly is that test kit checking for? Anybody know? Okay, I know we're getting short on time, so I'll give it to you. Folks, the pregnancy test kits that you can get over the counter and which you can also get at your doctor's office are trying to detect the presence of a specific hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin. These tests are checking for a hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin, which is a hormone that's released early in the pregnancy, soon after implantation. Okay? So that's what the test kits are actually checking for. The test kits over the counter are pretty accurate, but the ones that are done by the medical labs through the doctor are even a little bit more accurate. Okay. We also have the embryonic period of the prenatal state, and this includes weeks 3 through 8 of the pregnancy. Okay, and what I'll mention here, it is during this period of development that the baby's going to take on his or her gender, whether the child's going to be male or female. Okay, now that in and of itself is a pretty complicated process of establishing gender, but at this point you know that females have 2 X chromosomes, right? And males have an X and a Y. And the reality of it is there are special genes. There are special genes on the male Y chromosome that will activate during the embryonic period to bathe the baby in higher levels of testosterone. And it's those elevated levels of testosterone, which are controlled by genes on the Y chromosome, that take the child that doesn't yet have a gender and turn it into a male. Okay? Genes on the Y chromosome are responsible for turning the child into a male. Okay? All right. Any questions right now? Sorry this is so fast, folks. Number 3 is the fetal period. Okay, the fetal period is weeks 9 through birth. Okay, so let's be clear here. Up until week 8 of the pregnancy, technically the child is known as an embryo. But from week 9 onward, it's considered to be a fetus. It's just an arbitrary designation. Okay? It's during the fetal period that the child will most rapidly grow in body size, weight, and length. Okay, during this period, the child experiences its most rapid growth in body mass and length. Just to give you an idea here on this, for example, okay, the average baby during this fetal period from week 9 through birth will have its mass change from the mass will change from 0.018 pounds to 7.5 pounds. That reflects an increase in body mass of 425-fold. That's a 425-fold increase in body mass during the fetal period. That's, an incredible increase in size. In terms of length, it's not quite as impressive, but it's still impressive. The average length starts out at 2 inches. Okay, it starts out at 2 inches. I'm gonna put parentheses around these things. The length starts out at 2 inches, and over the following weeks of the fetal period, that length will increase to 14 inches. So a 7-fold increase in length. On average, okay? So you can see there really is a dramatic increase in mass and length during weeks 9 through birth. Okay, we're getting close to our time. I want to wrap this up, and I want to give you an opportunity to have some input. So I'd ask that you maybe stay with me another 5 or 10 minutes before we have to wrap things up here. If you do have to go, I understand. But okay, so that's a very quick coverage of the prenatal state or the prenatal period. Okay, let's talk about the postnatal state or the postnatal period. Okay, what happens after birth? Well, here, we're still experiencing it, right? None of us have died yet, fortunately. And so there's basically 4 major stages here. Infancy. This is typically considered birth up to 1 year. So birth to 12 months. That's considered the infancy period of your life. We have the childhood period, which is typically considered month 13 up until before you start puberty. So obviously that's a shifting date, but we'll say on average about 12 years old. So 13 months to 12 years. And obviously there's some flexibility because we all know somebody that maybe started puberty when they were 10 or 11. Okay, it all depends. We have adolescence. This is from puberty to our late teens. Okay, so 18, 19. And then we have adulthood, which all of us are in right now, which is typically defined as the late teens and onward. Now let's be honest here. These are just categories that talk about physical developmental stages in our life. But we all know it doesn't necessarily reflect emotional or psychological maturity, right? There are very, very few 18-year-olds that are ready to raise a child. While they are physically able to have the child, they are not emotionally, psychologically, or financially ready to raise that child properly. So, we're talking about physical development, not emotional maturity here. But okay, as as we end this course here, I'd like to ask you if you can help me. Let's talk about aging. What habits should we adopt to stay healthy and age well? What do you think, folks? Please type in your recommendations of what you think are helpful for yourself and others to be healthy adults. What should we do? I'm going to compile a list here that we'll put into your notes. What should we do to be healthy? Okay, let me start the ball rolling. Obviously, getting exercise. Okay, awesome. Keep them coming, folks. So, exercise, eat right, which means to have a balanced diet. Okay, when we say that by balanced diet, what we want to have is lots of fruits and vegetables. Lots of fruits and vegetables, lean meat. Okay, you want to avoid sugary snacks. Okay. All right, manage stress well, right? Easier said than done, but that's an important feature, right? We want to manage stress. Okay, so how can we manage stress, folks? What do we do to manage stress? I see your comment, Alexi. What can we do to manage stress? Well, let's see. I manage stress sometimes by exercising. I also manage stress by listening to music. What else do you do to listen to stress? Okay, yes, I like exercise helps with stress, no doubt about it, right? Yoga, absolutely, right? Okay, we can put some of that down. Yoga, Tai Chi, walking, okay, basically, weightlifting. Okay, let's put doing sports down here, but obviously that is physical activity, so that goes together. Fantastic. The nice thing about sports, though, not only does it give you a physical outlet, what does it usually do? What does a sport usually do? Doesn't it usually connect us to other people? Typically team-based sports, right? Maybe you participate in a local volleyball league or a softball league or something like that, right? So in other words, part of managing the stress is maintaining and nourishing your friendships, okay, your relationships with people, okay? Emotional and psychological health is every bit as important as your physical health, because if you have too much emotional, psychological stress, it will physically tear down your body, without a doubt. Okay, so we want to maintain healthy relationships with folks, with our family, with our neighbors, with our friends. That's extremely important. Alexi, you mentioned taking supplements. Okay. I will say yes to that, but you don't want to overdo it with the supplements. But you're right. If you're not getting enough vitamin D3 because you never go outside, maybe taking a vitamin D tablet is important, right? So take supplements, but don't overdo it. Okay. What else could we do to stay healthy? Okay, folks, here's another one. Drink water. Drink water. Drink lots of water. Don't drink Coca-Cola. And as enjoyable as it is sometimes to have a beer or two, don't overdo it, because obviously, drinking, obviously you have the risk of becoming addicted and becoming an alcoholic. that's not a terrible risk unless you have a family history of it. But the point of it is alcohol is damaging to your body if you overdo it. So we want to be careful of that. So drink lots of water. Okay, water is the solvent that will remove the toxins and waste products from your cellular metabolism and activity. Okay, awesome, Alexi. Can't forget about sleep, right? Get appropriate sleep, right? For some folks, they thrive on 7 hours of sleep. Others need 8 hours of sleep. It's a little bit different for every person, but get appropriate sleep. So we're probably talking 6.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep for most people. Okay, and it's got to be good quality sleep, right? You can't be laying down for 8 hours, but you've only been asleep for 4. That just doesn't work. Okay, anything else you can think about that you have found beneficial in your life, in which we need to choose to do? I will point out a couple things, right? Choose, right? It is a choice. Choose to avoid dangerous habits like smoking, right? Smoking is just not going to help you, folks, right? It's going to destroy your lungs. Choose to avoid dangerous habits. Choose to not do drugs, because really the outcome of that is never a good thing, right? We have some choices in our health. We have some choices that can allow us to live a better quality life. Okay. Anything else? I think there's at least one other thing that we probably have forgotten. Well, okay. Have healthy, mature sexual relationships. Okay. Sex is supposed to be part of your life, but it's got to be done in a mature, responsible way where you're not hurting another person. But when it is done in a mature, responsible way where both partners are consenting, it can be an amazing thing that helps you manage stress and live a happy life. Okay? So, what else? Anything? Okay. All right, folks. I think we'll wrap it up here. So let me open the floor to you at this time. Are there any questions you would like to ask to help get you ready for the final exam? As I said, I will be sending out the study guide later today, so you will have it. But is there any topics that are on your mind that you'd like to ask about while we're still together? Okay, usually when we get to this point in the semester, it's kind of like, oh, please just let it end. Please just let it end. So I understand that feeling, and it's going to be over very soon. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this Word document, and I will send it to you later today. Okay, folks, this is our last time together, right? We're not going to meet for class again. There's no lecture on Monday, and your final exam is on Wednesday, May 13th. So this is our last time together. I want to just take a moment and thank you for the dedication you have shown to this course over this very difficult time in the life of our society and of our world. This is not easy to stay focused, to learn and be a student during all these other important distractions. So thank you for sticking it out. And I want to encourage you to, take a nice rest after the semester is over. And I really hope you have a nice summer, and I hope you continue with your education afterwards so you can meet your career goals and whatever dreams you have. So thank you. And if you have no questions and something comes up, please send me an email. Otherwise, I hope come fall that maybe I'll see you walking around the hallways at Hack as you continue your education. So Gang, thank you so much. Take care, and I'll see you. Remember next week for your final exam. Okay, be well, folks.